The American Revolution is one of the world's most defining chapters. It gave birth to a new nation, the United States of America, and ignited revolutionary ideals that would ripple across the globe. The road to independence was neither short nor simple. It was shaped by decades of growing tension, resistance, and war. From the prelude of colonial unrest to assembling a makeshift army and the eventual defeat of the British Empire, the American Revolution was as much a military struggle as it was a political and ideological one. Prelude to the Revolution: Seeds of Discontent. Long before the first shots rang out at Lexington and Concord in April 1775, friction between Britain and its American colonies had been simmering. Following the costly 7 Years' War, 1756 to 1763, Britain sought to replenish its treasury by taxing the colonies. The Stamp Act of 1765, the Townshend Acts of 1767, and the infamous Tea Act of 1773 were met with colonial outrage. The phrase, "no taxation without representation," became a rallying cry, symbolizing the colony's frustration at having no voice in the British Parliament. The Boston Tea Party in December 1773 further inflamed tensions, prompting Britain to pass the Coercive Acts, known in America as the Intolerable Acts, in 1774. These laws were intended to punish Massachusetts, but unified the colonies in resistance. In response, delegates from 12 colonies convened the First Continental Congress, laying the groundwork for coordinated opposition. George Washington, reluctant hero turned revolutionary icon, war was already underway when the Second Continental Congress met in May 1775. In June, George Washington was appointed Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. A Virginia planter and veteran of the French and Indian War, Washington was chosen for his leadership, military experience, and ability to unite the southern and northern colonies under one command. Washington's leadership was marked by both strategic brilliance and extraordinary perseverance. He endured brutal winters, most notably at Valley Forge, held together an under-equipped and under-trained army, and avoided catastrophic defeat through sheer tenacity and tactical retreat. Though not always victorious in battle, Washington excelled at survival. And in the Revolutionary War, survival was victory. The role of individual states. One of the complexities of the American Revolution was that it was fought not by a unified nation, but by 13 independent colonies, or states as they increasingly began to identify themselves. Each state had its government, militia, and level of commitment to the cause. Massachusetts was the spark plug, home to radical thinkers and the early battles of Lexington and Concord. Virginia contributed key leadership, including Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Patrick Henry. New York was a critical battleground, repeatedly contested and eventually occupied by the British. South Carolina and Georgia became key fronts in the Southern campaign, with major battles like Charleston and Cowpens. Smaller states like Rhode Island and Delaware still played vital roles through militia support and political advocacy. Despite regional differences and occasional friction, the colonies slowly came together, united by a shared sense of injustice and a desire for self-governance. Assembling the Continental Army. The formation of the Continental Army was nothing short of a miracle. In 1775, the colonies had no national army, a formal chain of command, and few supplies. The early military was cobbled together from various colonial militias, citizen soldiers with little training and no uniforms. Under Washington's leadership and with support from the Continental Congress, the army began to take shape. Foreign officers like Marquis de Lafayette from France and Baron von Steuben from Prussia provided much-needed military training and discipline. Von Steuben's work at Valley Forge was particularly transformative, turning a ragtag group into a more effective fighting force. Supply shortages were constant. Soldiers often lacked shoes, coats, or ammunition. Pay was irregular or non-existent. Nevertheless, a shared vision of liberty and a growing belief in the cause held the army together. How the U.S. Army defeated the British Empire. Defeating the most powerful empire in the world was no small feat. The British Army was well-trained, well-supplied, and backed by a formidable navy. So how did the Americans prevail? Home field advantage. The Continental Army knew the terrain and used guerrilla tactics effectively, especially in the South. Popular support. Local militias and communities provided intelligence, supplies, and manpower that kept the revolution alive. Flexible strategy. Washington avoided full-scale confrontations that could destroy his army, instead focusing on attrition and strategic engagements like the Battle of Trenton. Foreign alliances. The American victory at Saratoga in 1777 convinced France to join the war in 1778. French troops, supplies, and naval power were decisive, especially in the Battle of Yorktown, 1781, where British General Cornwallis was forced to surrender. British overreach. Britain underestimated the colonists' resolve, misjudged Loyalist support, and struggled to maintain control over vast territory. Lingering effects on the development of the United States. The American Revolution not only created a new nation, but it also established foundational principles that continue to shape the U.S. to this day. Constitutional government. The idea that government derives its power from the consent of the governed became central, eventually resulting in the U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights. Federalism. The struggle to balance power between state and central authorities began during the Revolution and continues to be a defining feature of American politics. Military tradition. The Continental Army's origins seeded a proud, professional military tradition that evolved into today's U.S. Armed Forces. Political identity. The Revolution forged a uniquely American identity, centered on liberty, self-determination, and skepticism of centralized power. Lingering effects on American society. The Revolution's consequences reverberated even after the war ended with the Treaty of Paris in 1783. Slavery and hypocrisy. The ideals of liberty clashed with the reality of slavery. While northern states began gradual emancipation, slavery expanded in the South, foreshadowing the tensions that would erupt in the Civil War. Native American displacement. Many indigenous tribes sided with the British, hoping to stop American expansion. With Britain's defeat, U.S. expansion accelerated, often violently displacing native peoples. Women's roles. While women contributed immensely during the war, managing homes and businesses and even participating in combat, their rights remained limited. However, revolutionary rhetoric inspired early feminist thought, such as Abigail Adams's famous plea to "Remember the ladies." Global inspiration. The American Revolution inspired movements abroad, notably the French Revolution. It became a symbol of republicanism and resistance to tyranny. Conclusion. A revolution that never ended. The American Revolution was not just a war for independence, but a radical rethinking of governance, rights, and society. It produced a new nation, but also left unresolved contradictions and challenges. In many ways, the United States has been living out the ideals and confronting the limitations of its revolution ever since. Its legacy endures in every democratic election, every civil rights movement, and every debate over freedom and justice. Although the revolution may have ended in 1783, its impact continues to define the American experiment.